Thank you so much. I hope you all realize what a privilege it is to have the originator and also just the pioneer of BMI here, to have the first Hispanic chancellor of the CUNY system here in the building. I mean, come on. To have President Wilkes, we've seen you grow in your career here and now become president of the MCC. What an honor to have you. We're so lucky to have these people here, so understand that this is an important moment for the legacy of BMI. But without further ado, I want to just real quick introduce our keynote speaker. So I didn't prepare a script for this. I just want to say, Shaun, we appreciate you. We've been watching you and growing in your influence and how you supported communities that have been just as involved. You've spoken out. You visited families who have been affected by being even having family members who've been killed or shot by those from the police system or from the law enforcement. And you've always been even advocates of those who are just having good messages. And you also even provide light and levity. Sometimes when people are activists, everything they say is heavy. Shaun, you'll check his Instagram. Sometimes he'll post something fun with a kid dancing in a corner somewhere, and so you have a great balance of understanding what's important in life. And with the committee this morning, when we met at 7 a.m. for our meeting to get ready for today, I told them, I said, today is not about work. Today is about relationships. We're here because we are trying to connect across the aisle. I hope somebody here meets somebody new today, connect with some other BMI program, somebody from a different campus than you are, because it's about connection, and you're going to be working with some of these people in this room for maybe the next 15, 20 years. They might become your employer or your employee. So please understand it's about connection today. It's about relationships. I'm lucky where I have another hustle outside of here where I don't need BMI money. I have my own thing. This is a passion project for me to be here. And so I'm really happy to do this work, and I hope you all understand that we're all doing this for you as the students. So Shaun is going to come and represent. Without further ado, let's give him a round of applause and welcome Mr. Shaun King to the stage. Appreciate y'all.
Everybody put your hands together again for Shaun Best. Such an amazing leader. If I can, I'd like a handheld mic if somebody could bring me. I'm a mover. Here we go. Let's see. Test. There we go. Thanks, Shaun. It's good to see you all. I'm honored to be here with you, and thank you all for taking out some of your morning. Before we get started, as everybody else has done, I want to thank the Chancellor and the college president and others for their support of BMI. It's a big deal. Nobody asked me to say this, and I get to leave. I don't work for CUNY, and I have an unlimited subway pass, and so after I leave here, I'm getting right back on the train to Brooklyn. And so me and the city councilwoman, we get to speak our truth and then go somewhere else. And this program 14 years ago was given a $2.5 million budget, and 14 years later, it still has a $2.5 million budget. And if you heard one of the C's was confrontation, and it wouldn't be me if I was not confrontational. It's in love, though. This program, it's not even a program. It's 35 programs. It is one of the most brilliant institutions in all of New York City. And it's actually a mistake that it has the same budget it had when many of you were watching Rugrats, when many of you were little children in kindergarten. It has the same budget it had back then. And so I just want to say that from the microphone, and I let the Chancellor and the college president know. They're not against that, by the way. But it needs to be doubled or tripled, because here's the thing. 15 years ago, it had 500 students. It is now more than 10 times that come through this program, but on the same budget. And so I also want all of you who are directors and staff members, I want you to hear from me. You and Shaun and the team, you all are my peer heroes. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for the work that you do. Put your hands together for all the staff. We might have to maybe together, all of us in the room, I'm going to talk about organizing. Maybe there are some smart ways that we can organize together to make sure that this budget is steadily increasing every single year. And what I've learned and what the city councilwoman understands is that a lot of people talk about certain priorities that they have. And I noticed there was a bit of a religious audience here. The Bible says, where your treasure or where your money is, there your heart is also. That I can tell your heart by your budget. That's what the Bible says. That if you look at a budget, you can see someone's priorities. And we hear a lot of leaders in this city say what their priorities are, but when I look at the budget, it doesn't look like it. And so we would just like a budget that matches the priorities for this program, and it's necessary. I have a couple stories that I want to tell you. I am literally at my seat texting with the family and attorneys for Botham Jean. Brilliant, beautiful 26-year-old brother who was shot and killed in his home in Dallas, Texas. I was with them on Sunday as we celebrated what should have been Botham's 28th birthday. And as you may know, a Dallas police officer, while Botham was literally in his underwear on his couch watching television, eating a bowl, he had like an ice cream addiction, we've learned. He was on his couch watching TV at 11 o'clock at night. And a police officer walks into his home and shoots and kills him on the couch. And for the first time, talking about organizing, me and local activists and organizers and an organization that I help run called Real Justice, we helped elect the district attorney of Dallas. Manhattan has a horrible district attorney, horrible. And all throughout the boroughs, we have a lot of district attorneys that aren't deeply connected to the community. Many of you in this room have gone through courtrooms and have faced these very prosecutors and DAs or ADAs. And we helped elect Dallas's district attorney, and so for the first time in Dallas, we had some leverage. And over the past week, we were actually, maybe for the first time in my life, so proud, one, because they charged this police officer, but because the prosecutors, if any of you, it's been on television, they went hard after this officer. And we were shocked because normally when police officers are charged, prosecutors throw the case from the beginning and barely even treat the case seriously. And I was with the family on Sunday, and privately, we were all very happy because we were pretty convinced that we were going to get a guilty verdict in this case. The jury is deliberating right now. Right before, if you've seen my Instagram this morning, I posted about this. Right before the jury went to deliberate, the judge said something that shocked the hell out of all of us. She said, before you deliberate, we need you to understand that the officer, Amber Geiger, that the stand your ground laws, which allow somebody to shoot and kill you if you enter their home, that these laws also apply to her, even though she entered his home. Never, the law is called the Castle Doctrine. If you Google those words, the word castle, like a Castle Doctrine. The Wikipedia page on the Castle Doctrine is actually pretty good. That word castle, it's not named after someone, it's named after a castle. And the doctrine comes from all the way from the 1700s, off of it's a sexist phrase, but the phrase comes from the 1700s, that a man's home is his castle. And the doctrine states that if someone enters your home or your car or your property, that you have the legal authority to use lethal force against them. And the judge, right before the jury, and the jury was shocked, right before they went to deliberate, said, just want you to know that this law also applies to her, even though she entered another man's castle. I said that to say that we are confronting, listen, a system that was not built for us. All right? Listen. This system was built and designed. Often we make a mistake, and I know why we make it. I echo Sean Best's recommendation to read the new Jim Crow, watch the documentary 13th. But we often make a mistake of saying that the criminal justice system is broken. And I understand, that's almost true. I understand why people would look at it and say it's broken. Two things. First, it's not broken. It is actually probably the highest functioning system in our society. It is operating exactly the way the people who built it, it's operating exactly the way they designed and intended it to function. Well, that's important to understand, because when something is broken, it suggests it was built well and is now no longer functioning the way it was built to function. That's very different than understanding that, no, actually, this thing is firing on all cylinders and is operating exactly the way they want it to function. Because how you fix a thing that's broken is with a few tinkers. How you confront something that was actually unjustly built is very different. It's a very different problem to confront. And for a moment, on Sunday, me and Botham's family and attorneys had a moment where we tricked ourselves into thinking this system might actually work for us. Only for the judge to remind us, hold on, here's an asterisk for it. There is a footnote in the law that you now have to give her the ability to defend herself in your home. And I ask you, it's a reasonable question, and I think it exposes the fundamental hypocrisy of what many of you in the room have experienced or may experience or are connected to someone who has experienced. Ask yourself this. If Botham Jean, college-educated black man that he was an executive at PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the leading professional organizations in the world. If Botham had accidentally walked into a white woman's home, she's in her drawers, eating ice cream on the couch. Botham shoots and kills her, then texts his girlfriend, his married girlfriend, that's what she did. She texted her married boyfriend. Say Botham looks at a white woman's dead body with a bowl of ice cream next to it, texts his girlfriend, then refuses to provide any first aid, even though he had a backpack full of first aid supplies, which she had. Ask yourself, what would happen to Botham? Botham would be lucky if he made it out of that apartment alive. Certainly he would already be in jail or prison right now, and they would not be applying the Castle Doctrine to any one of us if we did this. The point is, this system was not designed to provide us safety. It was designed to punish us. And that's a painful reality. This past week, I had a chance to speak at the National Underground Railroad Museum in Cincinnati, Ohio. Now, if you ever get a chance to go there or to the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., it would be my dream come true for you to go to either one of them. Like, it should be a life goal for you to take the train or take the drive to the Smithsonian Museum in D.C. or the National Underground Railroad Museum in Cincinnati. And they had something in the National Underground Railroad Museum. And for those of you who may not be deeply familiar with what the Underground Railroad is, it was not underground, and it was not a railroad. It was a name that they gave the system and the network of people who were helping enslaved Africans escape slavery. And the Underground Railroad was just a connection of people, of homes and private secret places you could go. And if you crossed the Ohio River from Kentucky to Cincinnati, you were technically free. And so right on the banks of the Ohio River, they've built this wonderful museum. And inside of the museum, I saw something that shocked me. And it is one of the most important artifacts in the history of slavery. They had I thought it was a model, it's the actual house. They had a fully intact building where enslaved Africans who were being bought and sold and traded as property, where they would be held sometimes for days and days. And it wasn't a replica, it was the actual home. A barn had been built over it, which preserved it, and it looked almost as if it was brand new. And all around it, they had the actual literal anchors and chains that were used to chain people down. And what I learned as I toured that museum was something that I knew already, but to see the actual artifacts blew my mind. What I saw is what Michelle Alexander says in The New Jim Crow. There's also a book you should read called Slavery by Another Name. If you're not a big reader, and that's okay, go to YouTube and type Slavery by Another Name, and there's a bootleg version of the documentary that somebody has very kindly uploaded. There's an actual documentary on the book, and it's perhaps even, it gives a visual element. I'd love for you to read the book, but see the documentary. And what that book and that documentary shows is that when slavery technically ended, the systems and structures didn't go away. They just built mass incarceration on top of it. They didn't erase all of the systems and structures. All of us in the room have moved into a home that someone lived in before, right? And when you move in, there's a difference between moving into a brand new home and moving into a home that's been lived in many, many times. It may be completely clean, but there are little dents on the wall and little things, marks on the floor. Mass incarceration was just built in the house of slavery. The structures were still there, and they built prisons and policing systems in the same house. And here's what I want you to understand. I've thought about this all week. BMI, this program, is the modern Underground Railroad. for mass incarceration. This is the modern day version of the systems and structures and people who are saying, let me help you escape something that if you're not careful will chew you up and spit you out. How many of you in the room have a friend or loved one who is currently incarcerated? I do. How many of you in the room have a friend or a loved one who has suffered gun violence, or maybe you've suffered it yourself? I need you to understand who we are and where we are. I say something, I'm a historian by training. My undergraduate and graduate degrees are in history. It's hard to know a moment in history when you're in it. Because today just feels like today. Today is Tuesday. You woke up, you had breakfast, you caught the train, you got here, you packed your bags. It didn't feel historic, it felt normal. And when you read about history in the history books, it doesn't sound normal, it sounds special. And it's very difficult for us to discern where we are in history. History is best understood when you look back on it. It's hard to understand when you're in it. Right now, this nation is not only the most incarcerated nation on earth, it incarcerates more people than any country in the world. And let me give you just a few corrections. You'll hear a lot of people say that this country incarcerates about 2.5 million people a year. That is not true. On any given day, about 2.5 million people are in jail today. But over the course of the year, the number is about 10.5 million that are in jail over the course of all 365 days. About 10.5 million people are incarcerated. Not another country in the world crosses 1.5 million. We are 10.5 million. We incarcerate more people percentage-wise than any country in the world. But let me tell you where we are in terms of history. Right now, this country incarcerates more people than any country in the history of Earth. It's an old Earth, right? To have the all-time world record for incarceration is a horrible reality. Last year in the United States was the deadliest year for gun violence in the history of this country. Last year. We are the only nation on earth with more guns than people. We have over 350 million guns and about 320 million people. That means we have 110 guns per every 100 people. No other country has 100 guns per 100 people, or 90, or 80, or 70, or 60, or 50. And there are over 200 countries. The second place country in guns per 100 people is Yemen, which is in the middle of a historic civil war. So there is the United States today, and then half of that is a country in the midst of a famine and civil war. That's why the United States some days feels like a civil war, where you wake up and learn, oh, he went to that Walmart and shot 22 people. That is with a weapon of war. Last year, over 40,000 people were shot and killed in this country. And here's what I want you to understand, that how we confront mass incarceration, how we confront gun violence requires the same sophistication of the Underground Railroad. Because just as in the Underground Railroad, there are people everywhere who do not want us or you to succeed. They are determined to not only incarcerate us, but to also stop any type of change that bucks the system. Why? Because it is the root of all evil. There is always a money trail when you see evil. And there are millions and millions of people whose livelihood is based on guns and incarceration. These companies are publicly traded in the stock market. They are a part of something that many of us have called retirement plans and mutual funds. There are people who have generational wealth off of our oppression. And when you try to interrupt that, they will try to stop you. Last year, there's an organization in this country that spent more money last year than any civil rights organization in America. And last year was their worst year ever financially, and they spent $330 million. Guess who that organization is? NRA. Last year was their worst year. Let's do the math. Somebody pull out the calculator on your phone and do 330 million divided by 2.5 million. This budget's 2.5 million. Their budget is 330 million. What's that? How many times bigger is that? 100. The NRA's budget is 132 times bigger than this budget. So let me tell you, they get 132 times the results. Now let me tell you what they do. They don't do change. Their mission is to block change. Our mission is to make change. Their mission is to block it. And here's how effective they are. We have short-term memories because we are all experiencing so much pain and trauma, it's hard to keep up. Do you remember that just 2 years ago, a man took enough weapons for a small army to a high floor in a hotel in Las Vegas and shot nearly 500 people? Now, let me be inappropriate. He shot 500 white people. And when I actually thought, they might do something about this problem. He shot 500 white people at a country music concert. They didn't do anything about it. It was the largest mass shooting outside of war in American history. Why did nothing happen? Because there is an organization that is so deeply committed to blocking change and is so well funded to make sure that all change gets blocked that they succeed. There is a tweet that gets retweeted after every mass shooting that basically says, after this country allowed 20 babies to be killed in Sandy Hook and did nothing about it, it pretty much threw in the towel. It isn't so much that the country threw in the towel, it's that there is an organization there to block change. And what I want you to understand is that with a budget 132 times less than theirs, look at what we've done. What could we do with twice the budget? What could we do here with $330 million? Well, I know what we could do. Everybody could attend CUNY for free. That's a start. My dear friend Bernie Sanders, he told me the same thing. He went to Brooklyn College, and he told me face to face, I introduced him at his rally when he kicked it off. He said, Shaun, I went here for free. I left Brooklyn College with no debt. And what I want us to understand is that any change we want to see, we have to organize with the same level of sophistication as those who are organizing against us. Do you understand what I'm saying? In this room, I'll close with this thought. In this room, there are enough of us to organize all by ourselves. If not another person comes in this room, we have enough people, enough education, enough ideas, just for those of us in these seats, to organize to make sure this budget gets doubled or tripled or quadrupled. We often are highly energized, but very poorly organized. And here's what I would like to leave us with, because that budget can only... How many times have you had more month than you had money? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like, okay, I just ran out of money and I have 11 days left in this month. That's the $2.5 million budget. It can, Shaun and the wonderful team and others, we can squeeze the hell out of that $2.5 million. And it is miraculous what it has continued to be able to do for 14 straight years. But if all of us in the room organized ourselves into a lobbying force, we could make sure that it was doubled or tripled. We are only as powerful as our willingness to organize. It's not enough to want it. It's not enough to really want it. You have to organize for it. I'm going to take some questions from the audience, and then I have to run, but thank you all for having me here, and we'll take some questions. Thank you all. Appreciate you.
All right.
Thanks, Shaun.
Yep. We have just time because the panels need to get started soon. So The first 3 questions, please come up to me, and we will ask them consecutively and just give them all at Shaun at one time, and he can answer them all together.
Right,
so if you'd like to ask a question right now, come to me now.
Cool. Come on
Come
down.
to me now.
There
1,
we go.
2, 3. Oh, you're all the way over there. Come on over. Cool. All right. So just ask your question, and then we'll.
And Shaun, here's my email address. You'll never forget it. I'm so old that I got a Gmail address before Gmail. I got a beta Gmail address before it even was available. My email address is ShaunKing@gmail.com. Because I was one of the first people. I was on a waiting list. That's how old. I was on a waiting list for a Gmail, and they just gave me my name. So ShaunKing@gmail.
That's old school.
All the time, yeah.
Appreciate it.
Email me your question if you don't get a chance to ask it, okay?
All right, great. Awesome. All right, question number 1.
All right, brother. Good to see you, my man. Thank you, homie. Hi.
My question is, after listening to your story, based on evidence for the laws, if we are actually growing up into another system and a lot of justice or criminal systems is happening, how do we actually bring up to what is happening today instead of our past? We're taking it back to our culture. So in order to get that support that we're fighting, what laws or rules do we follow now as we growing up into a different generation?
I got you. Thank you. Shaun, you want me to take a couple of questions
Let's
and
do 2
answer
at a
them all?
time,
Okay.
and then we'll have you answer after every 2.
Good afternoon, I think, or good morning. Jason Acosta, represent Department of Education, NYC Men Teach. Quick question. For me as a young leader, one thing that I always come across, despite how unapologetic I am, is that we have to be strategic when we come to the table.
Yeah, man.
Because not only do, once you get the seat at the table, you got to stay there.
Yeah.
And so what I come across often is in politics is that we have to find a way to communicate to still get our message across and still maintain our agenda. So what is one strategy that you use or have used in the past to maintain your seat at the table but be strategic about your approach and still getting what it is that you need done?
Great. Let me answer that question first, and then I'll come to you, okay? I have a quick story to tell you about insiders and outsiders, okay? Tell me your name again one more time, man. Jason. I got a phone call in 2014 from a friend of mine who worked at the White House. And President Obama was still president. And this was at the height. Mike Brown, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, John Crawford had all just been killed by police. And we were protesting here in New York and all over the country. And the White House privately was forming this council on police brutality. It was a big deal. And my friend called me. I didn't know they were forming the council, and I was so full of myself, I guess. I thought he called me and he was telling me all about myself. He said, Shaun, everybody in the White House reads your articles. We all really respect you here. I was like, oh, wow, that's a big deal. And what he was doing was, if you ever become a supervisor and you have to fire somebody, what you do is you tell them a lot of great things about themselves, then you fire them. And what it's called the sandwich approach, where you tell somebody something good, then you give them the meat, and then you tell them something good again. And so he told me all these great things, and he said, hey, I just want you to know something. We're forming this council on 21st century policing, and I want you to hear it from me first. You're not going to be on the council. And he said, listen, he said, I just didn't want you to see the list and be surprised. He said, I know that you may know as much about this as anybody in the country, and we've all learned about it because of you. But he said, Shaun, you've said some things even about President Obama. You've said some things that, and he said, just brother to brother, I just want to tell you, that make you too controversial for this committee. And my heart was hurt, not because I love committees, I don't. But I felt like I had something to contribute. I felt like I could come there with more of an edge than some other people. And he said, Shaun, let me explain to you, Jason. He said, this committee has to be as non-controversial as any committee could be, because we want it to operate in the shadows. And he said, most of America won't even know the names of the people on this committee. He said, but Shaun, I promise you, they're all brilliant. And he said, if you were put on the committee, right away, every conservative news website tomorrow would say, oh, they have a Shaun King committee at the White House. Oh, look at what Shaun said about President Obama using drones. Look at what Shaun said about, and I was hurt, but then I realized that, and I talked to several people, Jason, that were on that committee, and they said to me, Shaun, we have held our tongue our entire lives so that we get access to certain tables, to certain rooms. And what I realized, I knew it in a way, but what I experienced there was a realization that because I speak so freely, I don't get invited to the table. Now, people who were at that table told me, Shaun, you speak for us. Because we're at this table, we don't get to say what you say, so please, Shaun, don't stop. But the trade-off, Jason, for me is, I get to say from the mic that Manhattan has a horrible district attorney, and I don't worry about it, because I already have multiple candidates we plan on running against him anyway, and so I get to speak freely, but I don't get to be at the table. So I hope that many of you in the room choose the difficult path, Jason, to get an invite to the table. Because all of us don't get to be like Bernie Mac on the mic. We don't get to say whatever we want about whoever we want. It will then harm your ability to have access to certain rooms. Some of you need to play the game so that you can get in places where you can negotiate. Some of you need to have a revolutionary heart that nobody else really knows about, so that you can find yourself at tables where you negotiate revolutionary policies that surprise people. They know I'm a revolutionary on the outside and the inside, so they don't even invite me. So my role, Jason, my role is to inspire you, who then gets to go to the table. And I accept that. I'm okay with that. You have to learn your role. Shaun, I'm sorry, that question is a big question because many of you need to choose the difficult path of shutting up, tweeting less. In fact, I would strongly advise you to Google how to delete all of your tweets so that they will never be held against you next year or 2 years from, and start off with a clean slate. That's done for me. And I'm okay with that. But others of you have to walk this very difficult path. And then some of you will take my path. But it can only be a few of us. We need more of you in the room.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Shaun. My name is Darlene. I'm a big fan of your Instagram and of
Thank
your
you.
work. I am myself a BMCC student. I'm a Black Dominican immigrant, and I work at Options, so I intern with like education, attainment, and access. Now, all these things I do and all these things that I identify with contribute to the kind of work and the kind of passions that I hold. So my question for you, which is kind of a two-part question, sorry. My first question would be, how do you intersect all these identities and all these issues that you care about into one organizing? So like, for example, as an immigrant, but also as a Black woman who believes education is the key for social mobility, sometimes it's hard for me to put the two together, because sometimes people make you pick. What are you, an immigration activist or an education activist? So what would be your advice for that? And also, what are the three most important, I would say, ingredients or concepts when it comes to efficient organizing?
Okay, Shaun, let me tackle this just real quick. There are many choices that each of you have to make, and one of the biggest choices is going to be the cause that you choose to fight for. I have a whole book that comes out not until April, so it won't do you any good until April. But when it comes out, the book is all about that choice. That if you are a woman in America, you are an immigrant in America, you are Black in America, like you are intersectional all by yourself. So you don't have the luxury of just caring about one thing. But here's what I want you to understand. All of us have the capacity I care about 20 different issues, but you can only fight effectively on one, maybe two. You get much beyond that, you'll struggle. So here's a quick, I could take hours to teach you how to do this. You could either, oh, there you are. You could either choose one cause and just know I am one person. I cannot save the whole world. I cannot fight every battle. I've made the painful, difficult choice of choosing one cause. Or you could do something very much like what Sean Best has done. You could choose a cause that then impacts all types of issues. So in Sean's role, he is addressing a whole list of problems. And so it has a specific scope, but it allows him to care about civil rights, human rights, mass incarceration, equality, educational funding, housing, all of those things are under his purview. So I have chosen one. I fight primarily against police brutality and mass incarceration. You don't have to choose my choice, but you do have to make a choice. Because until you do make a choice, you will just be all over the place. And when you're all over the place, this is painful, it gives you the emotional feeling that you are doing more than you really are. It makes you feel like, I'm doing a lot. Well, you care about a lot, but you're not doing much. I would rather you put your feet down and say, this is my issue. And I'm not moving until we change it. And so that's what I've done on mass incarceration and police brutality. And because I don't just care about mass incarceration and police brutality, I then support all the other people who made different decisions than me. So I care about the environment, but that wasn't my cause. So I amplify people who made that their cause. I care about immigration, so I amplify people who made that their cause. You understand? All right.
Last one.
Hey, man. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Shaun King. My name is Damir Harad. I'm 19 years old. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My question to you is, in pursuit of this nation being built and constructed against our people, what advice or suggestions do you have for young black men like myself who are attending PWIs and still have a long way to go in school and society overall?
That's a great question. And I'll start off where I left off even in our conversation earlier. I was blessed to not attend a predominantly white institution. I went to an HBCU. I went to Morehouse College in Atlanta. And I travel. I've now traveled in the past 5 years to 45 states, to hundreds of colleges all over the country. And the beauty of being at Morehouse was that for 4 or 5 years, I lived in a bubble where racism and bigotry didn't even exist in our bubble. Like Morehouse, it was as close to Wakanda as something could get in the United States. The president was black, the vice president was black, the chief of security was black, the person at the security gate was black, the people who mowed the yards were black, the professors were black. And it wasn't just black, it was free, and it was, free in terms of mind and spirit. When you are at a predominantly white institution, there are unique problems, but also unique opportunities. So at Morehouse did not prepare us, for instance, on how to interact with white people. And there are pros and cons to that. We left Morehouse with our self-esteem fully intact. I speak to black students, black and Latino students at predominantly white institutions who often are beat down emotionally from the experience. Well, we didn't experience that, but we also then left Morehouse entering a society where we had not played their game and we're not played their rules. I'll say there are two things, and people are surprised when I say this. When you go to college, your GPA, it really matters. Now, that's not to make any of you whose GPA has slipped to make you feel some kind of way, but as much as many of you want to be a full-time activist and a part-time student, my advice to you would be a full-time student and a part-time everything else if you have that ability. Because when you leave there, your GPA is like a passport that will open a lot of doors or sometimes close them. And you heard from the stage young men who said, I was on the honor roll, I had an advanced give it your best. And then secondly, while you're at that institution, just remind yourself that your goal every day, your goal is to graduate that place. It's not your home. It's not where you will always be. It is a stop on your path. And while you're there, you have to always understand and remind yourself, I'm here to get my degree, to go on either to get my next degree or the next degree, or go on to have the type of profession that you want. And that allows you to endure some of the challenges that you will experience there. Lastly, it's okay, it is okay that some people don't understand you. I worked for years, and part of why Shaun and others invite me to places like this, I worked for years and years full-time as a teacher in prisons and youth detention centers all over Georgia. And part of what I was a part of a grant program to prepare people for life after incarceration and also to teach them how to endure incarceration. And part of what I had to teach young men and women was, listen, when you get out, a lot of people will not understand you or respect you. I can't say it out loud, but there was a video from Robert De Niro. It's on my Instagram. You should check it out. You just gotta forget. I say forget them, but you see the video, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's a little more colorful. It's a little more New York than forget them. It's okay if people don't understand you. Like, free yourself of that expectation. It's perfectly fine. And Dave Chappelle told a joke on his last comedy special that was actually, it was a painful moment. Dave Chappelle, he told a joke that was deeply insightful. He said he realized for years during the crack epidemic, including right here in New York City, that it seemed like nobody gave a damn about the crack epidemic. And he said he never understood how that felt until he saw the opioid epidemic all over the country, primarily with white folk. And then he felt like, hell, I don't give a damn. And that's awful, right? I don't mean that as a compliment. Then he realized, like, well, hell, now I realize I don't care. People rarely care about your problems. And we have to free ourselves up from even expecting them to. We have to care enough about our problems for ourselves to be able to build the change that's necessary to build. All right? I got to run. We're over time. Thank you all so much for having me. Have a great day. Oh, I got it. Yeah. Take care.
Thank you, man. Yes, round of applause. Testing. Shaun, we appreciate you. Little thank you from us. Let's get this picture. Appreciate what you're doing.